the quiet before. You have to drive a good 10 minutes off the main highway, past the last gas station, and over a rust-stained cattle guard, before you even saw my ranch. It wasn't fancy, just a patch of dry Texas land with mesquite trees clawing at the sky and a wraparound porch that creaked like it remembered every boot that ever stepped across it. I didn't need much, just the open air, my horses, and the sound of cicadas in the summer. Peace had a sound out here. That silence before the sun rose. That distant moo from a neighbor's cow. That snap of a screen door, followed by coffee brewing. I was born here, raised here, and after my father passed, I took over the ranch without blinking. Folks from town still called it the Hollis place, even though the paint had peeled and the sign by the entrance leaned to one side like it had something to say, but gave up halfway through. It was land passed down and worked on by black hands for 3 generations, a quiet monument to hard work, quiet defiance, and long memory. My neighbors, on the other hand, were newer. Much newer. 10 years ago, the only other buildings on the road were barns or trailers. But then came the development. New roads, gated homes, vinyl fences, shiny mailboxes with fake copper finishes. They called it Marble Hollow Estates, a name that had nothing to do with the land and everything to do with the image they were trying to sell. White families mostly. A few wealthy Ladings couples from the city. And 1 or 2 military retirees who always kept their yards too clean. They didn't wave when they drove past. Not unless they were the kind who worked in real estate and thought it might look good on social media. Most didn't like that my horses sometimes wandered close to their lot lines, or that the land didn't have curb appeal. The HOA came shortly after the 5th or 6th house went up. Not that I cared, my property wasn't part of their development. Or so I thought. On most mornings, I'd saddle up my mare, Duchess, and ride the North Trail, a dirt path that curved through the trees, crossed a shallow creek, and cut near the boundary where the new homes sat like white teeth in a too-perfect smile. That trail had been used by me and mine since the 1950s, long before zoning maps got pretty colors and lot numbers. One morning, while checking the fence line, I noticed a metal stake had been driven into the ground about 10 feet off the trail, bright orange tape flapping like a signal. I figured it was just some land surveyor, maybe checking easements. Nothing to fuss over. But then another appeared the next week. And another, closer to my path. Didn't bother me much at first. People are always measuring things they didn't build, a kind of modern disease. But then came the letters. Printed envelopes with logos, fancy fonts, and terms like compliance and unauthorized access. One even suggested my riding trail was interfering with neighborhood aesthetics. I laughed, tossed the letter in the wood stove, and poured myself a second cup of coffee. But something about it lingered. The kind of way smoke sticks to your clothes even after the fire's out. A month later, while driving into town for feed, I passed 2 HOA board members. One white man with pressed jeans and a tucked-in polo, the other a younger woman with a clipboard and sunglasses too big for her face. They were standing just outside my property line, pointing toward the road that crossed in front of my ranch. I slowed down, tipped my hat out of politeness, and kept driving. But I saw them glance at my truck, then at each other. Later that week, my closest neighbor, Miss Thelma, who'd been here nearly as long as I had, mentioned during a grocery aisle chat that the HOA was discussing some kind of perimeter beautification plan. Whatever that meant. She said it with a raised brow and a slow shake of her head, the way older Southern black women do when they've seen enough foolishness for one lifetime. The thing is, they couldn't see the land the way I did. To them, it was space. To me, it was place. There's a difference. A place remembers things. It holds onto footprints, echoes, and blood. I didn't care for their rules or their ornamental trees. But I started to care about how often their tone changed when talking to me, how neighbor shifted into landowner when the conversation turned toward property lines. There were rumors about a gate going up, some new fencing to secure the neighborhood from external traffic. I didn't think it would matter to me. Why would it? I lived here long before they did. And I had right of access. It was public road. Wasn't it? Still, that stake with orange tape stayed on my mind. Because I knew the land. And I knew how fences start small, with one post, one wire, one false assumption, Until you wake up one morning and find you're boxed in. Lines they crossed. I always believed that land teaches you patience. It doesn't move fast. It erodes, it shifts, it grows with time. The wind teaches you to listen before reacting, and the soil reminds you that nothing worth having comes without effort. I had built my peace around that rhythm, trusting that the world outside my fences would leave me alone if I left it the same. But peace doesn't last when other folks decide what's best for you. It started with a gate, not mine, but theirs. One Monday morning in early spring, I drove out to deliver a few bales of hay to a neighbor who couldn't make the trip himself. That's when I saw it. A brand new metal gate, wide enough for a truck but closed tight, stretched across the entrance to the one-lane road that ran between my land and the development. Two shiny signs were bolted into the bars. Private road, residents only, and HOA property, no through access. I pulled over, stepped out, and stared at it for a good while. My tires had rolled down that road for years. So had my father's. The road was dusty, unpaved, and rough around the edges, but it was ours in spirit, if not in writing. I wasn't the only one caught off guard. Miss Thelma called me that evening, saying her cousin had been turned away by a security guard posted near the gate. A guard. For a neighborhood with fewer than 40 homes. They told her she had to go around, she said. Add 20 minutes to her trip for what used to be a 2-minute drive. Told her she didn't belong. I didn't say much at first. Just sat on my porch, hat low over my brow, watching the sunset bleed into the land like watercolor. But my blood was boiling beneath the surface. That road had been maintained by the county until just a few years back, when the HOA had offered to relieve the county of responsibility in exchange for privacy. A backdoor deal. I didn't pay it much mind at the time. I didn't think they'd have the nerve to block it off completely. Not with us still living here. But us was a shrinking group. Most of the older black families who used to live on the edges of the ranch had moved or sold. A few were priced out. A few passed on. The new homes were built with covenants and restrictions and expectations. Ones that didn't include folks like me, unless we were lawn care crews or hired help. They called the area revitalized in the newspaper. Clean sidewalks. Decorative lighting. A splash of imported landscaping. But to me, it looked like gentrification in slow motion, a controlled burn dressed up as progress. That Friday, I stopped by the HOA's temporary office trailer, a sleek box with tinted windows parked on what used to be a wildflower patch. I asked for someone to explain the gate. A woman named Jenna greeted me with a clipped smile. Blonde hair. Pink blouse. A shiny badge on her chest that read Community Director. She used the word unfortunately more than once, and each time, it sounded like a substitute for something more venomous. Unfortunately, access to this portion of the road has been limited for residents only, as approved by our board and in line with our covenant agreements. I asked her who gave them the authority. She smiled again, even tighter. The easement wasn't public anymore. The county relinquished it. So now it's private, and access is restricted to those who meet our community standards. I didn't raise my voice, didn't threaten, just nodded and walked out. But my chest felt tight, like the wind had been knocked out of it. That night, I walked the fence line on the west end of the property. Coyotes howled in the distance. My boots kicked up dust as I passed the old water troughs, rusted and half-buried. I paused by a lone pecan tree and looked out toward the development. Their porch lights twinkled like stars, sterile and bright, cutting into the darkness where it didn't belong. I realized then, it wasn't just about the road. It was about being removed. Quietly, neatly, with paperwork and polite emails and soft-spoken legalese. They didn't want me gone with pitchforks and torches, just gone eventually because it was inconvenient to have me there. Because it disrupted the image. They wanted a bubble. A safe, curated space where nothing unexpected or unapproved slipped through. And I, with my muddy boots, my black skin, my old ways, didn't fit the brochure. There was a history buried under these pastures. My grandfather tilled them by hand. My father built the first barn plank by plank. I wasn't about to be erased by manicured lawns and bylaws printed on glossy paper. They thought a gate would stop me. But I had other plans. A fence too far. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm again, but not the kind I liked. The peace I once had started to feel artificial, like background music turned up to mask the sound of something ugly scraping just underneath. The mornings were still quiet, the kind of hush you only get when you're surrounded by land instead of people. But now, when I drank my coffee and looked out toward the north side of my property, the new metal gate glinted like a warning. Like a middle finger made of steel. I tried to ignore it, focus on chores, tend the horses, patch the roof. But the road closure had changed everything. The feed truck couldn't take its usual route and had to detour nearly 30 minutes around. My nephew, who visited every Sunday, had to reroute through the next county over. And my vet, an older Latina woman who'd worked with my animals for years, told me plainly they looked at me through that gate like I was trespassing. The HOA had crossed the line, and they were only getting bolder. 2 weeks after the gate went up, I found fence posts on the southern edge of my land, brand new, pale wood with surveyor marks still fresh. I followed the line with slow steps, heart thudding harder with every post I passed. They weren't just blocking roads now. They were trying to carve up the boundaries. I called the county office. After half an hour of hold music and transfers, a clerk told me that a new subdivision plat had been filed. Apparently, the HOA was beautifying the shared corridor by extending fencing to enclose communal walking space. According to them, my southern edge was a shared utility easement with interpretive flexibility. Interpretive flexibility. The next day, I drove to town, bought 3 signs from the hardware store, and posted them along that fence line. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted in big, bold red letters. I sprayed each one with waterproof sealant and hammered the stakes in deep. By the time I got home, there was already a note on my gate. Folded, taped neatly, printed on HOA letterhead. It said I was escalating tension and warned of potential legal recourse for acts of intimidation or property misrepresentation. I didn't laugh. I didn't tear it up this time. I folded it once, put it on my desk, and sat down with a pencil and a pad. If they wanted lines, I'd draw one of my own. I spent the next week researching zoning maps, land rights, easement laws. I even drove 2 counties over to meet a retired surveyor named Earl, a friend of my father's who had helped mark the original paths through our land decades ago. He brought out a dusty folder, cracked it open, and pointed to the map with a thick finger. "That road right there," he said. "You may not own it, but neither do they. And if access has been historically shared, there's a thing called prescriptive easement. Look it up." I did more than that. I hired a lawyer, a young black woman named Danielle, who didn't flinch when I explained the situation. She said the case was messy, but interesting. "You've got a strong position," she said. "But the better move might be creative leverage." That's when the idea took root. Not just resistance, not just holding the line, but turning the tables. The private gate the HOA had installed blocked their road, but the only alternate entrance into their development ran directly past my land. My dirt driveway cut through a narrow stretch between 2 rocky ridges, a spot too rough for new construction. And guess what? That alternate entrance wasn't theirs. It was mine. That winding gravel path was my property, a private easement I had inherited through deed, with no HOA claim over it. Most of them had been using it without thinking, just assuming it was public space. I spent a weekend cleaning it up. Cleared brush, widened the path a little, leveled the rocks. Then I put up my own gate. But this one had something extra, a payment box. A handmade sign hung beside it. Private access toll, $5 per vehicle, cash or Venmo. Trespassers will be reported. I installed solar lights, set up trail cameras, and had my lawyer send an official notice to the HOA, informing them of the toll. She included a scanned copy of my land deed. Every vehicle passing through would be considered to have accepted the terms by entry. Standard fare. Some of my neighbors were furious. I expected that. One guy, the one with the Audi and the barking golden retriever, tried to argue with me about freedom of movement. I told him plainly, You don't want to pay the toll? Use your gate. You built it. The best part? Half the development didn't even know the road was private until now. My inbox was flooded with passive-aggressive messages. A few sent threats. But more than a dozen just paid the toll. I didn't set the price high. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. Payback and passage. For the first time in weeks, things felt normal again, at least on my side of the fence. I'd wake early, sip my coffee from the porch, and watch the sun crawl over the ridge. The mornings were cool, with dew rising off the grass and the smell of damp cedar in the breeze. My horses grazed peacefully in the field. The birds still sang like the world was untouched by pettiness and property disputes. Except now, I had a new view to enjoy, a stream of HOA residents slowing their shiny SUVs at my handmade toll booth, most grumbling, a few smirking. The sign stood tall and proud. Private Ranch Access Road. Toll required, no exceptions. Every now and then, someone would try to speed through without paying. But the cameras caught it. My lawyer caught it. And a small claims court summons followed, signed, sealed, and delivered. It wasn't just about money, it was about accountability. I was done being erased quietly. The HOA board called an emergency meeting 2 weeks after the toll road went live. They sent me a letter first, printed on heavy stock paper, lined with legal jargon and veiled threats. They accused me of exploiting residents, obstructing emergency services, which was a lie. I'd already given full, toll-free access to fire, medical, and police, and failing to respect the spirit of neighborhood harmony. I sent a letter back 3 sentences long. If your neighborhood respected harmony, you wouldn't have blocked my ranch in the first place. The road is mine. The toll is legal. Good luck. At the meeting, which took place in the shiny HOA clubhouse with air conditioning and fruit trays, I sat in the back row, cowboy hat pulled low. They didn't expect me to show up. One by one, residents voiced their complaints, not about me, surprisingly, but about the board. This whole mess could have been avoided, one man said. We didn't ask for that gate. My real estate agent never said anything about a toll, another added, frustrated. A few even defended me. Miss Thelma showed up with a folder of her own, copies of the original land use maps from decades ago. Mr. Hollis ain't doing anything you didn't try first, she said with steel in her voice. Difference is he's got manners. He put up a sign. By the end of the meeting, the HOA president, the polo shirt man with a fake smile, looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. They asked me, with forced civility, if I would consider a compromise to remove the toll in exchange for restoring access and preserving neighborly relations. I said no. I told them I'd remove the toll when they removed their gate. I offered the same compromise they denied me weeks earlier. They refused. So the toll stayed. Over the months, something funny happened. People adjusted. A few residents even started greeting me when they passed through. One woman, a single mom with 2 kids and a rescue dog, started leaving envelopes with thank you notes and extra cash. She said the HOA had ignored her complaints for months, but at least I was straightforward and fair. The gate they built, their symbol of control, was starting to rust. Literally. A hinge failed one weekend. Took them 5 days to fix it. During that time, the only way in or out was through my toll road. I didn't raise the fee. Didn't have to. Poetic justice doesn't need inflation. In town, people started talking. The local paper wrote a short piece titled, Rancher Turns Tables on HOA, complete with a photo of me tipping my hat in front of the toll booth. My lawyer, Danielle, framed a copy and brought it to my house as a gift. You know, she said, this could set a precedent. I told her I didn't care about precedents. I just wanted my damn road back. But deep down, I knew this was bigger than fences and tolls. It was about history, about who gets remembered and who gets removed. These kinds of battles have happened before, just under different names. Redlining, zoning, eminent domain. Same fight. Different paperwork. The difference now? I fought back. And I fought smart. The land didn't change. The sun still rose slow over the hills. The creek still murmured on the west side of the pasture. But now, There was a little metal box collecting $5 bills, a reminder that power goes both ways. I stood out by the toll road one evening, watching the cars roll through. Some waved. Some looked away. One teenager threw me a peace sign. I nodded back. Behind me, Duchess snorted gently, brushing her muzzle against my shoulder. The air was thick with dust and twilight. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. They had tried to fence me in. But instead, I turned their barrier into my boundary. And I charged them for crossing it.